All right, UPSC preppers, you know the drill. It's January 11th, 2025, and we're diving into those current events that could be lurking in your exam, so listen up.
We're talking more than just headlines. It's that deeper analysis, that so what, that can make a real difference in your understanding.
You got it. So let's jump right in. We've got Germany dealing with their first foot and mouth disease outbreak. Haven't seen this in almost 40
Now,
years.
foot and mouth disease, or FMD, it's a highly contagious viral disease, but it's hitting livestock, so cattle, sheep, goats. It's a big deal for trade and animal welfare, even though it doesn't directly affect humans.
So not a public health crisis, but definitely something that could have an economic impact, especially for a big exporter like Germany.
Exactly. Think about it. Meat prices could be affected, trade restrictions, livelihoods of farmers, all because of a virus. And this actually links to something that is relevant for the exam, and that is the World Organization for Animal Health.
Okay, WOAH. Now that you mention it, I do remember seeing that somewhere.
WOAH was partly founded because of FMD outbreaks. It's the global authority on animal health. They set standards, coordinate disease control, keep livestock healthy, and trade moving smoothly.
So UPSC folks, if you see a question about international organizations, animal health, or diseases and trade, WOAH is one to remember.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to something a bit more uplifting. In Rajasthan's Desert National Park, there's been a sighting of 12 great Indian bustards.
That's fantastic news. I have to admit, though, Desert National Park, I need a little refresher. Help me out here.
Picture this. You're in the Thar Desert, and this
Mhm.
park is huge, over 3,160 square kilometers. It's a landscape of extremes. Scorching heat, very little vegetation. You have these ancient salt lake beds, even Jurassic fossils.
Wow, a crash course in geography and history. What kind of wildlife can survive in a place like that?
Well, it's a unique place. You've got creatures like the chinkara, the desert fox, and of course, the great Indian bustard, which is critically endangered. This park, with those thorny bushes and the kedgeree tree, it's a perfect example of desert adaptation and the Bishnoi community's conservation efforts.
So UPSC peeps, Desert National Park itself, endangered species, desert ecosystems, human communities, and conservation, it's all there.
Now, let's get a little technical, but trust me, it's relevant. The Ministry of Commerce is blaming some discrepancies in gold, counting on the shift to IceGate.
Ice Gate, is that like some kind of futuristic portal?
It might not be a spaceship, but it's pretty important. IceGate stands for Indian Customs Electronic Gateway. It's the main portal for everything related to customs in India. Import, export, duties, clearances, it's all handled through this system.
So basically making trade smoother, digitizing things, and connecting the different parts of the import-export process.
Exactly. And this gold counting problem highlights how even something technical can have real-world effects. If IceGate has glitches or vulnerabilities, it can affect trade efficiency, revenue, even India's reputation internationally.
Makes sense. So understanding IceGate isn't about tech jargon, it's about how trade actually works in India, which is a big deal for the UPSC syllabus.
For sure. Now let's talk about the National Youth Festival, NYF, just around the corner. This year it's being held at Bharat Mandapam in Delhi.
NYF rings a bell. It's connected to Swami Vivekananda, right?
You got it. National Youth Day, which falls on Swami Vivekananda's birth anniversary, January 12th. It's all about celebrating young people, promoting national integration, showcasing what India's youth can do.
So it's more than just speeches, right?
Oh, yeah, there's tons of stuff. Cultural programs, conventions, exhibitions, adventure activities, the whole works. Thousands of delegates from all over. This year's focus is innovation in science and technology.
Perfect timing with India's push to become a tech leader. So for our UPSC listeners, this is a prime example of a government initiative with social development, cultural events, and government priorities all wrapped up in one.
You said it. Okay, on to something that might seem a little niche, but it's a potential game changer. Indian startups are now getting access to homegrown silver nanowire technology.
Silver nanowires. Now that sounds futuristic.
It kind of is. These tiny silver wires, incredibly conductive, you can use them to create flexible and transparent circuits. Think bendable phones, wearable tech, even car windshields with built-in electronics.
Wow, that's incredible. Why is this such big news for India, though?
Well, right now we import most of our conductive ink.
Yeah.
With this development, we can start making it here, which is huge for becoming self-reliant in key technologies. And the global market for this stuff is going to be massive by 2032. We're talking almost $17 billion.
Okay, so this isn't just about cool gadgets. It's about technological advancement, economic growth, and getting away from relying on imports, all things the UPSC loves.
You got it. All right, let's shift gears. The incoming U.S. president is suggesting we rename the Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America.
Wait, what? Okay, that's a bold move. But before we get into the controversy, remind me, why is the Gulf of Mexico so important?
It's often called the Mediterranean of the Americas. Strategically important, economically important, bordered by the U.S., Mexico, and Cuba, and it's a huge center for oil and gas production.
So not just some random body of water, renaming it to Gulf of America, that seems like, claiming ownership.
You could say that. It's a symbolic move, but it carries weight. A way of showing American dominance in the region, maybe.
I'm sure Mexico and Cuba have some thoughts on that.
Absolutely. This could lead to all sorts of things. Diplomatic tensions, instability in the region, maybe even economic problems.
So a seemingly simple name change could have a huge impact on international relations. Another great example of how symbolic acts have real-world consequences, which the UPSC loves to test.
Exactly. Okay, let's bring it back to India. There's this initiative, Project Veer Gatha, and it's really gaining traction.
Project Veer Gatha, I think I've heard of that. Remind me what it's all about.
It was launched as part of a Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, celebrating 75 years of India's independence. It's all about awareness, about the bravery of India's gallantry awardees and freedom fighters.
Keeping those stories of courage alive, especially for the younger generation.
You got it. They use essay competitions, quizzes online, different events, Project Veer Gatha. It's all about inspiring young Indians, connecting with their heritage, understanding the sacrifices made for their freedom.
And I see both the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Education are involved. Makes sense, it's about teaching history, but also those values, definitely relevant for UPSC.
Absolutely. Now, some sobering news. The World Meteorological Organization, the WMO, has declared 2024 the hottest year on record.
Not good. I vaguely remember the WMO from school. What do they do again?
They're like the UN, but for weather and climate. They collect data from all over, monitor weather patterns, issue warnings about extreme events. They're the authority on everything climate-related.
So when they say hottest year, it's not just an opinion. It's serious data and analysis.
Exactly. And this is information for everyone. It's about climate change, how it's impacting us, and why we need to take action collectively.
UPSC folks, take note. Understanding the WMO, their data, and climate change are all super important for your exam.
Let's end with a really cool discovery. Scientists have found a brand new species of pangolin in Arunachal Pradesh.
A new pangolin? That's amazing. What's the scoop?
It's called the Indo-Burmese pangolin, Manis indo-burmanica, scientifically speaking. Identified using genetic analysis by the Zoological Survey of India, or ZSI for short.
So this wasn't just finding a pangolin that looked a little different. They did actual DNA analysis.
Precisely. Shows you how much we still don't know about our planet's biodiversity. A new piece of the puzzle, and a reminder that we still have so much to explore and protect.
Especially since pangolins are sadly some of the most trafficked animals. This discovery really highlights the need for conservation.
For sure. The UPSC could ask you about the ZSI, biodiversity, endangered species, all sorts of things. Lots of potential there.
You're telling me. Speaking of organizations, you mentioned the WMO said 2024 was the hottest. But I also saw something from the Copernicus Climate Change Service saying the same thing. Are they connected?
Not directly, but they're both major players in climate monitoring. The Copernicus Climate Change Service, or C3S, it's part of the European Union's Earth Observation Program.
Okay, a European initiative all about climate data. What kind of stuff do they provide?
Mountains of climate data, past trends, future projections, you name it. And it's all free, available through their climate data store. Researchers, policymakers, anyone can use it.
So a massive climate library that anyone can access. Amazing. And I'm guessing this is relevant for the UPSC.
Absolutely. Knowing about C3S, their data, and their role in climate policy is crucial.
Well, we covered a lot today. Livestock diseases, desert ecosystems, global trade, groundbreaking tech. Current affairs are definitely keeping us busy.
And that's why we're here, to help you sift through it all and focus on what matters most for your UPSC journey.
If you found this deep dive helpful, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more insightful analyses. We'll be back soon with more news, insights, and tips.
You know, thinking about this potential Gulf of Mexico name change, it actually connects back to Project Veer Gatha.
I see what you mean. They both touch on national identity and how that plays out globally.
Exactly. Project Virgatha is all about those heroes who shaped India's identity, remembering their sacrifices, their courage, the values they stood for.
And it's not just looking back, right? It's about how those values are still shaping India today and into the future.
Precisely. Instilling pride and patriotism in young people, but also encouraging them to live by those values.
And I think that's what's interesting about this Gulf of Mexico thing. Renaming it could be seen as the U.S. pushing its identity onto a region with a very different history and culture.
Right. It makes you think about how nations see themselves in the world, balancing their interests with those of their neighbors. How do they handle that?
It shows that national identity isn't fixed. It changes. It's shaped by things within and outside a country.
And speaking of shaping things, let's go back to those Indian startups and the silver nanowire technology. Another example of how India is shaping its own future on the world stage.
It's about investing in innovation, creating a culture of entrepreneurship, ultimately a more self-reliant and technologically advanced India.
You got it. And moving towards making silver nanowire ink here, that's strategic, reducing dependence on imports, establishing India as a tech leader.
It also shows how even a small technological advancement can have huge ripple effects. What other industries could be changed because of this?
Who knows? And speaking of big changes, let's revisit that news from the WMO, 2024 being the hottest year ever.
Yeah, this really emphasizes how urgent climate change is, not just for India, but the entire world.
For sure. The WMO, they're crucial for tracking these changes, giving us the data to make good decisions.
And it's not just about knowing the science, it's about actually doing something. Adopting sustainable practices, investing in renewable energy, working together to deal with climate change.
And speaking of working together, remember the Copernicus Climate Change Service, they also confirmed 2024 as the hottest year. Shows how important international cooperation and data sharing are.
Right, multiple organizations independently verifying this. It strengthens the evidence, shows we need a global response.
It also highlights that climate change isn't just an environmental problem, it's economic, social, a security issue. It affects everything.
And it reminds us we all have a role to play, whether it's individual actions, community stuff, or policy changes.
Speaking of individual action, I think it's worth mentioning Germany's foot and mouth outbreak again. Even though FMD doesn't directly affect us, it reminds us how human and animal health are connected.
Good point. How we treat animals, manage livestock, how we deal with outbreaks, it all has implications for human health.
Absolutely. We need to think about health holistically. Humans, animals, the environment, it's all connected.
And speaking of connections, let's go back to that Gulf of Mexico name change. Shows how something that seems isolated can actually have effects across borders and continents.
Definitely. We live in a globalized world. Actions in one place have consequences elsewhere.
We need to be aware of that, to really think about the impact of our actions and find solutions that work for everyone.
Well put. Okay, back to Project Virgatha for a moment. It's not just about remembering the past, it's about inspiring the future.
It's about those stories of India's heroes continuing to resonate with young people, shaping what it means to be Indian.
Exactly, connecting history, identity, and action.
And speaking of connecting things, those Indian startups with the silver nanowire tech, that's a perfect example of how a small technological advancement can have huge implications for a country.
It's about promoting innovation, becoming self-reliant, positioning India as a leader in new technologies.
It also reminds us that progress doesn't just happen. It's influenced by government policies, investments, and a culture that's open to new ideas and taking risks.
And speaking of culture, the National Youth Festival, bringing together young people from all over India, celebrating diversity, talent, potential, it's really important.
It shows that India's strength is in its unity, in diversity, and harnessing the energy of its youth.
Couldn't have said it better. Now let's shift gears and talk about that new pangolin species found in Arunachal Pradesh.
Such an incredible discovery. Proves how much biodiversity we have in India. It shows how important research and conservation are.
It also shows how much we still have to learn about the natural world, all the species out there.
And since we share this planet, let's go back to that news about 2024 being the hottest year on record, confirmed by the WMO and the Copernicus Climate Change Service.
Climate change is urgent, it's a global challenge, and we need a global response.
It affects everything, from our economy to our health and security.
And we all have a role to play in tackling it, no matter how small our actions might seem.
Absolutely. As we wrap up this segment, I want to remind everyone, staying up to date on current affairs isn't just about the UPSC exam. It's about understanding the world, engaging with what matters, and becoming informed citizens.
It's about having a global perspective, thinking critically, and using what you know to make a positive impact.
And if you're enjoying this deep dive, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. We'll be back with the final part of today's show, wrapping things up and leaving you with something to think about.
As we're wrapping up, it's really interesting how this idea of interconnectedness keeps coming up.
I know, right? We saw it with that foot and mouth disease outbreak in Germany and the whole Gulf of Mexico name change thing.
Exactly. And even something like finding a new pangolin species in Arunachal Pradesh, it connects to these bigger issues of biodiversity and scientific research.
And technology, connecting the world. For good and bad. Icy Kate trying to make trade smoother, but then those gold counting issues shows we need to be careful.
Progress always has two sides, opportunities and challenges. It's up to us to figure that out.
And climate change is like the ultimate example of how connected everything is. The WMO and Copernicus, both saying 2024 was the hottest year. That's serious.
It really is. And it's not just about governments and organizations. We each have to understand our own role and make better choices.
Which brings us back to what you said before. Individual action matters. Project Virgatha, focusing on those values of courage and service, it's a good example.
Yeah, we're all part of a bigger story. Even small actions can contribute to a better future.
So for our UPSC folks, what's the big takeaway from all this?
Don't just memorize. Connect the dots. See how the world works as a system, how things that seem separate are actually linked.
It's that critical thinking, analyzing things from different angles, understanding the why behind the what.
And never forget that you can make a difference. Your career, your choices, your community, it all matters.
Well said. And if you enjoyed this deep dive and found it helpful for your UPSC prep, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more.
Keep learning, keep exploring, and keep striving for excellence.